Hi everyone. Today we are going to be talking about how we can estimate sums and differences. So that means we can estimate when we are adding and estimate when we are subtracting. Obviously we're going to be using a lot of word problems doing this, so I'm going to go ahead and just show you using word problems. The first one here, we are simply adding our we're adding after we estimate. Now, when we're estimating, we are going to first round all of the numbers that we have in our problem here. So the first thing that we have to do is we have to read the problem carefully to make sure we understand what it's asking us to do. This particular problem says, Sean is updating her iPod, and she notices that one of the songs she is putting on is 3 48 of a megabyte, so 3.48 megabytes, while the other song is 4.59 megabytes. What is the best estimate of the total size of the two songs? So something important when you're looking at these problems is figuring out what the question is asking you to do. First of all, it's asking us for the estimate, so I know that I need to find the estimate. I'm not going to just add these two numbers together. And also going to see that it's asking me for the total size of the two songs. Because it's asking me for the total size of the two songs, that means I'm going to be adding them together. So we have to figure out how much each song is, or what the size of each song is. One song is 3.48 megabytes, or 3 48 hundredths of a megabyte, and the other one is 4 59 hundredths. So those are our two numbers. Now, when we're adding decimals, or numbers with decimals, I should say, we want to be careful because the temptation is going to be just to go ahead and add the two numbers together. So I'm going to line them up right. Don't just add these together because it is asking me for an estimate. Okay. When I'm looking for an estimate, I'm going to go ahead and round these two numbers. So if we look at this number, I'm rounding to the nearest whole number, I should say. That's something I forgot to say. You're rounding to the nearest whole number if you're estimating. So I'm underlining the two numbers that means I'm rounding to. When I'm rounding to the nearest whole number, that means I'm rounding to the smallest of the whole numbers. What's the nearest whole number? So I'm going to circle this right here. And if I'm looking at this, is 3.4 or 3 4/10, is that closer to 3 or is it closer to a 4 here in the ones place? And I know that it's closer to a 3. Now I'm going to look down here at my 4 5/10. I know I'm rounding to the nearest whole numbers, so I'm going to be rounding to the 4. And I'm going to look at the number at the right. The number at the right is a 5, so I know that because it's a 5, it is closer to 5 here, so I'm going to round this number to 5. And all I'm doing now is I'm just going to add those two numbers together, which is going to give me 8. So my answer, the best estimate of the total size of the two songs is 8 megabytes. Alright, so that is if you're finding the sum or estimating the sum of a problem. Now we're going to look at what to do if we are going to estimate the difference. So let's look at this question real quick. Ariana has been getting ready for the Jingle Bell Run. She ran 5.82 miles on Sunday and she ran 7.31 miles on Monday. About how many more miles did she run on Monday than on Sunday? Now this is the wording you're going to see a lot. It's going to ask you how many more miles did she run on Monday than on Sunday. Now think about the problem. Does that mean that we need to add these two numbers together? No, they're asking us how many more miles did she run on this day than on this day. So first of all, I'm going to make sure I point out that it is asking us about. That means we are estimating. And we are going to find our two numbers that we're going to be using in our problem, which is 5.82 and 7.31. Now I'm trying to figure out how many more miles did she run on Monday. than on Sunday. So I'm going to have to subtract here. So I'm going to subtract 7 and 31 hundredths, sorry, from, I'm going to subtract 5 and 82 hundredths from 7 and 31 hundredths. Now again, do not subtract because we are finding about how many. So we are going to figure out here what we would round each of these numbers to. 7, we're rounding to the nearest whole number. So if we look at this, we round 7.3 to the nearest whole number. 7.3 is much closer to 7 than it is to 8. So I'm going to round 7.3 to 7. And 5.8, I'm rounding to the nearest whole number. I look at the number to the right, which is 8. 5.8 is much closer to 6 than it is to 5. Now remember, I'm subtracting here, so 7 minus 6 is 1. So if I'm trying to figure out about how many more miles did she run on Monday than on Sunday, I can tell you that she ran about 1 mile more on Monday. Alright, so that is going to be subtracting when you're estimating or finding the difference with decimals. Alright, now some questions are going to ask you to do a little bit of both. So let's look at this question real quick before I give you the problems you're going to do in your math journal tonight. The last question is asking me, Quentin and his mom went Christmas shopping for their family members. They started out with $100. At the first store they went to, they spent $58.29, and I just realized that I do not have a dollar sign here, so I'm going to add that right here. Very important. They spent $58.29 at the first store. At the second store they went to, they spent $23.42. About how much money did they have left? Now, if you look at my problem here, I have more steps than just adding or subtracting. It asked me how much money they have left. Well, I have to figure out how much money they spent in the first place. So I know they spent $58.29 at one place and $23.42 at the other place. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead and round these numbers. Let me change my color of my pen. So let's see, I have $58.29. And I'm adding these two numbers because I'm trying to figure out the total that they spent. And also, they also spent $23.42. Alright, now remember I'm rounding to the nearest whole number, which is going to be in the ones place here. So if I'm rounding 58 $58.29, that would round to just 58. Because that's $58.29 is much closer to $58 than it is to $59. Now I'm going to look at $23.42. $23.42 is much closer to $23 than it is to 24. So I'm going to round that to $24. Okay. Now I'm going to add these two numbers together, and that is going to get me $82. Okay, now what's the next part of my problem? About how much money did they have left? So I know they spent 82, and I know they started out with 100, so that means I'm going to have to subtract $82 from 100. And because there's no decimals, we don't have to round it anymore because we have the nearest whole number. And I know that 100 minus 82 is going to be 18. So when it's asking me about how much money they have left, I know my answer is going to be $18. Alright, well now it's your guys' turn to practice this. Don't forget to round first and then add or subtract, or in some cases do both. So here are your three questions. You're going to be using this chart right here to answer your questions. Please make sure you answer them in your math journal, and also complete your whisks in your math journal. Have that ready for class tomorrow. All right.